Hey, I'm Lurpus. I played Counter-Strike for a living for 8 years. I've been on the desk for some of the biggest events for 5 years. I know nothing about Counter-Strike, but then again, neither does Thorin. Welcome to his YouTube channel.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is KK, who is a really old school veteran Counter-Strike 1.6 player. Let's just start there, KK. So your original alias was Concat. First of all, what is a Concat, and why is KK the alias now? Is there a story behind that?
There is a quite embarrassing story behind that, but I guess Concat in Danish means king of cats.
Okay.
And that was my first nickname back when I would say 11 years old.
Oh, right. We started okay. That makes a bit more sense.
Okay. Our first clan team Gummy Bears with some of the people from my hometown. So eventually I thought we kind of need to eliminate the entire title and sum it down to KK. So that's basically the story behind the name. At one point, it was basically too late to change names, so I had to figure out what to do about it. Yeah.
Right, here's where I would start. Like, you actually hinted at it there, but one thing I feel like is going to be a theme in this interview is you aren't someone who was doing esports and Counter-Strike, a bit like how in the modern day, I would even say back then, a lot of people view it like sports. So in Counter-Strike, when it was competitive, for example, people do like ruthless things. They just move from team to team. You leave behind people who maybe were friends if you can get onto a better squad. In Danish scene, I'd say especially with all the LANs, people were always like, as you say in English, jockeying for position, trying to get into that team that's better. In your career, I feel like a theme I'd want to lay out at the beginning is it feels to me like you were the opposite. You were just sticking with people you liked, who were sort of like your friends or your group of people or long-time teammates. Like, if I look at your career, if I could put a list of like 10 names, and these were basically every team you ever played, it was just like 3 or 4 of these guys at least. So would you agree? Would you have a different approach, do you think, to being in teams, joining teams and stuff?
Yeah, I think I might tend a little bit towards sticking with some people you care about and you know. However, I think things were obviously slightly different way back when. There was few roster changes, but I mean, for me in particular, I kind of stuck with some of the people that let's say I grew up with in a sense. So I haven't really been playing on that many teams. Before I even joined the Titans, but I guess we'll get back to that. But before that, I played on a team called Whatever, and we basically played all kinds of different games: Warcraft 3, Quake, Unreal Tournament, and then eventually we got somewhat good at Counter-Strike, and then eventually I was asked to join another team, and even way back then when I was a way younger kid, it was a very huge decision for me because I left some people behind that I actually cared a lot about. So, yeah.
Was it the case? Because if people don't know, I know the results from Denmark in the early days weren't as big as Sweden's, but if people don't know, there already were some very established teams. Spirit of Amiga, obviously, then they made that level team, and these were already people who, had deep finishes at the big tournaments. Did you already know about that side of esports when you started? Were you just good at the game? Did you actually have like a sort of the esports dream?
No, I'm just a very competitive person. I grew up with sports, football, handball. So I'm very, very competitive. When we started Counter-Strike, obviously it was way back when it was called clan-based. That was where you kind of have your tournaments. Me and the team I originally started with, the local team from my hometown, we obviously knew that the good teams, the Spirit of Amiga was one of them. There was a lot of others, Elite Combat Team, but that's way back. But even in Whatever, obviously I knew about the high level teams, but we weren't really in a position to play against them because we weren't good enough. But I think I think it's the competitive nature of me that kind of drove it. I wasn't really planning on being a superstar within Counter-Strike. It just sort of gradually happened that I obviously spent a lot of time on the game, and we played some Danish gatherers and stuff like that, and then my name kind of got out there, I guess. It was basically Jonas who initially introduced me to Titans. Yeah.
Let's get into it then. So obviously the most iconic team you are associated with is the Titans, because later on this story you win ESWC and you have all these great results. But I would actually say one thing I found quite interesting was most people only know that team from when it broke out in 2004 and had the ESWC result and the World Cyber Games and all the rest of it. And so the lineup they're even thinking of, KK, I can tell them right now, like most of the players they're thinking of aren't even in the Titans at the time you joined it. Like I actually found one thing that was interesting was it looked like in the early days, there's actually a detail people seem to have missed, which is some of the people who were in this team early on were actually the ones who were in that team called Dynamic Crew, if everyone remembers, like John and Tom and these guys, and they were kind of people who'd like themselves been at the semi-pro level, and it looks like this was kind of the end of them playing, and then you guys came along and gradually replaced them in and out. Like I saw the first tournament you went, it was actually the CPL in Denmark, it was the Copenhagen one, and at the time the lineup it doesn't have whiMp and all these great players in, so you can imagine the result isn't that great, but that in itself, that must be an interesting like introduction to esports, to go to like a big CPL in your home country where all the best teams in Europe are there. Can you give me some thoughts on the Titans?
Yeah, I guess first of all, when I was asked to if I had any interest in joining the Titans, it was I guess on a different level than how they do stuff today. I was asked to go to Copenhagen. I'm placed in Jutland, so it's a 4-hour train ride to go to a boot camp or a tryout boot camp, I guess it's called, and that's pretty much where it started for me. And thankfully, I had a great weekend, and I was hitting my shots, and everything was aligned. So they gladly took me in. But the Titans I joined was a fairly huge team. I mean, I think we were basically 9 players at the time. So we had, you mentioned Arjun, we had Beastie, we had Toof, we had eGene, we obviously had EraZ, whiMp, a lot of good players, but it wasn't an established team. It was sort of.
Oh, when you say there was that many, is this cause it was like a clan-based team? Is you have to have a load of people so you can play each night and stuff, and people cycling out? Is it that sort of a logic, like an old school clan sort of?
No, because clan based was a little bit before that.
Right.
So I think they just really hadn't found their footing, I guess. So they've tried different players, tried different strategies, tried different in-game leaders, tried a bunch of stuff, and they were a top 5 team in Denmark, but that didn't mean that much back then, because there was basically, I mean, there were probably 1 or 2 Danish teams that could compete with the top at the moment, or at that time. So it was just a huge team where when we eventually landed on a lineup, a lot of stuff happened way before that. I played with Beastie, I played with Toof, I played with Ion, I played with different people within the Titans tag, but that's not the lineup that, well, I guess the world eventually knew about. So it was just not an established team when I joined them. They had a lot of great players, good individual players, and well-known Danish players, but not the results wasn't quite there yet.
At this time, when you're getting into the pro scene, did you actually were you a very confident player? Did you think you were really good?
Yes, I did. I did think I was very good. Luckily for me, the nerves of either playing on a big stage or playing finals or, well, whatever kind of match we're playing, it does not really matter that much to me. I play the game and I'm confident in the game. I was in a young age as well.
I also saw, this is another thing that's weird, because this is before the Titans becomes famous. I saw you guys went to that CyberX Games, the infamous tournament in Vegas, where it was supposed to be a giant, like 100K, and famously, it sort of happened, like it began, and then famously, like, they couldn't run the tournament, and then they made everyone play those bullshit show matches, and it was just over, right? And everyone nicked all the PCs or something. Like, can you give me some thoughts? Because if this is before, like, you even got, like, famous yourself, it must have been a really weird experience to go to America the first time, but go to a tournament that sort of didn't happen, and then have to come home. Give me some thoughts. What was this like?
No, but when we talk about those days, I usually refer to them as cowboy days.
Okay.
There was really no structure, and we've had there's a lot of stories about Danish tournaments as well where we got cheated out of prize money.
Oh wow, right.
Stuff like that. So it was kind of the Wild West back then. But obviously the CXG games was meant out to be a huge success, and a lot of sponsors and big prize pools, and all the greatest teams in the world was participating. So we've had some journeys to Greece and other events, but nothing quite as big as this one. So it was a huge disappointment for me. I had really looking forward to proving myself and the team on a grand stage like this, and I also think all the preparations was pretty much spectacular, but the event itself obviously were lackluster, because I still don't know to this day if it was the Steam servers or if it was funding or whatever. And yes, we ended up playing a shitty show match against Mouse Sports. I think we lost it, but generally there was no preparation within Las Vegas. So that's a funny story as well. So us, let's call us naive Danish people. So we're going to this. We're going to Las Vegas, so we thought the least of our worries is an internet cafe where we can play some games.
I bet there's none, right?
And there was absolutely none. I mean, we were way out away from the strip, finding some local little, pardon my French, shitty cafe. The computers were way too old, and nothing was really working. And even eGene got nicked by the taxi driver for, I think it was $2,000.
Oh my goodness, right.
So it's just really not a good time. And then you have, because we were there for 14 days basically, and well, then we had to play Mouse Sports, and we haven't even touched the computer in 14 days. And so I'm not taking anything away from Mouse Sports, obviously, but none of us could play the game as we usually do. And I mean, the setting was horrible as well. So it's just one last effort to just throw something out there, I think. But it was a huge disappointment. But unfortunately, not the only one. I've had several in my career.
One thing I thought would also be cool to establish for people who maybe know the story of the Titans and the biggest teams you were in is that the Titans, I mean, spoiler, that org doesn't exist to this day. It wasn't like a giant esports org like SK Gaming or Mouse Sports or MTW or something that had like history and all the big sponsors. In fact, as you alluded to, one of the things I thought was quite cool was even though your team, like skill-wise in the server was at this level and could compete with these teams, you guys never had the big sponsors. In fact, you always had to, like you said, you had to keep going to like Greek CPL qualifiers and stuff to just get the tickets to go to the event, right? And basically, if it wasn't for things like World Cyber Games qualifiers, CPL, you guys wouldn't have been there, right? If you'd have had to just pay or have a sponsor, I imagine you wouldn't have had the money for it. So wasn't it kind of like you were kind of hustling even in this team, right?
We were, and we had two managers, and we were quite unsatisfied with the performance on getting, because we were actually winning events like we're supposed to do. But the sponsors was somewhat lackluster. We had a few, but nothing that could cover an entire trip like that. And we also pocketed out some money of our own to participate in some of the tournaments. Luckily, we won some of them, so we kind of got the money back. But I mean, this would never go in this day and age, because we were the top team at one point. So we should have had some sponsors that could cover at least the travel expenses and stuff like that. And yes, a spoiler alert, I mean, the Titans eventually became SK Gaming, but that was I was not a part of that.
Yeah, we'll get to that, don't worry. I've got some questions about that, certainly.
Okay,
by the way, another thing as well I noticed that's quite cool is people will know that actually it was until quite recently there was obviously a very healthy Danish LAN scene, even in CSGO and other games like that. Back then, it looks like the scene was fun. That's one area I think of Danish CS that's misunderstood, mate, is it wasn't just like you're saying, yeah, maybe the only one or two teams could go to an international tournament and, you know, beat the top teams. But if you have a look, it was a very active LAN scene. Like I saw, you guys were going to LANs even between these big tournaments. And if you ever go and look, it's not like it's only LANs where people play with the real team. Sometimes these are mixed teams, and, you know, in the final it might be like you against two of the SK Danish guys next year, or some of your other teammates that were in former teams. It seems like almost every player you end up playing or join teams with, you've already played at these LANs, and like it's a pretty active circuit, right? You were going to all of them.
We had a very busy schedule, and we were also aiming to participate in as much as possible. I think the Danish community within Counter-Strike has always been fairly solid, even in the 1.6 days, and perhaps even before that. So that Denmark obviously isn't that huge of a country. So we all somewhat know each other from the scene. So there's a huge involvement in going to the local LAN parties, so the prize money. Well, I guess you're doing it a little bit for the prize money, but you're doing it also to support the event. So, and I think every team was good at that. And within Denmark, I mean, yeah, we won in an era that we won pretty much all of it, but there was a lot of tough competition in Denmark, and that's also helped improve the Danish teams in general. So we had fierce competition within just Denmark as well. And as you said, I mean, either I've faced up against them on the server, or I've played with them. Because let's say there was about 20 top people in Denmark, and obviously there was some mixing around with the teams, and now they're called this, and now these guys are playing together. But it was good competition, but it wasn't international level for most of the guys. But I mean, you see it today. Also, the top of the scene is really not that stable in Counter-Strike. It was way more stable back then, but
yes,
you could get some tough matches against even mixed teams, because I mean that's the random factor of Counter-Strike. If you face up against someone who just have the perfect day, then it will be a somewhat hard match. But I believe that strategy will hopefully beat, I guess, aim and skill in the long term.
Was the Titans a team employed? I mean, obviously it's famously a hallmark of Danish CS, but was the Titans a structured team trying a lot of tactics and flash strats and stuff? Were you more in that vein?
We were, most definitely. We were a very structured team with defined roles, and I didn't start out as in-game leader. eGene was the in-game leader when I joined the team. But eventually I was asked for the position, and I believe in structured Counter-Strike, and that's what we did. Obviously, we had some individual performers, as whiMp, for example, Drally as well, who were very good individual. But this is within the structure that we created, or I created, I should say, and that's how we played. So it's not. There's more of a random factor, I believe, today than there were back then.
Okay. One thing that's interesting is before you guys, to the world, you broke out at ESWC when you won that tournament. Everyone's kind of like mind blown. But if people don't know, before that, I remember you guys went to one of those Swedish LANs, the Rendezvous LAN, and you played at that one, and you played actually against the Eyeballers team that was one of the best in the world at the time. It's true, they did actually have Kalipo instead of Vilden. I looked it up. It wasn't like the true LAN, but still, it was like one of those ones where if you get to test yourself, you barely lost to this team, by the way. If you get to test yourself against a team like that, you kind of already get a sense we're actually for real. It's not just online shit, right?
Yeah, and I'm not a very good loser, to be quite frank, and that tournament still, I wouldn't say it nags me to this day, but a little bit.
Think you should have won it?
No, I'm not over it. No, but the thing is one of our sponsors, we might as well get it out there. One of our sponsors was Shuttle. They were.
They made the little PCs if people don't know.
They made the little compact PCs.
Yeah.
The only problem with them was that they overheated all the time.
Okay.
And that's what happened at this Swedish LAN.
Oh, during the matches, right?
Especially during the finals. So I think we dropped out 5 times, but they might have won.
Sure.
Either way, but that definitely didn't help.
It makes you wonder what if, right? You got to think about it.
Yeah. Because I believe that we were ready to face.
Right.
Well, basically all competition, including Eyeballs, including 3D, all of the greatest teams, and I was very unhappy with the ending of that. So we got a second place, and obviously that's fine. But I would have liked that final to be played under normal circumstances and see what was what.
Sure. After this, though, let's do it. Let's talk about the ESWC tournament. So it's true that ESWC, because it was like a different format, it wasn't like double a limb like the American CPLs, etc. It did produce different results, I noticed, over the years. Like you had certain teams go higher, certain teams go... The idea, like, here's the thing. To go to this tournament, I would say a normal progression for a team of your level would be like you make the playoffs. You know what I mean? You make like quarterfinals or something. Maybe you lose to a famous team. The idea you just win the whole event. I mean, even though back then there was no official term like in CS2 of majors, like we used to call events like ESWC, but they were called the majors unofficially. Like these were essentially the world championships. Give me some idea. How can a team that's essentially rookies to the rest of the world win a major, just come straight out the gate? Like, were you actually the number one team at the time, do you think?
That's a hard one. I guess unproven, yes. But it's actually many people who remember that era would perhaps remember Kim Rom, who had
of course,
explain.com, it was called. So he interviewed me before the ESWC even started, and he asked me what our expectations was, and I said it was number one. No, nothing number two, nothing number three, because I believed in the structure that we had and the preparations that we had. I believe we could beat every team. Obviously, we had to prove it, but I did believe that we could beat every team, and we perhaps even should beat every team that we faced off against. And our ESWC journey was, I mean, fairly uncompromised, I guess, in terms of results. I mean, we had Spixel in the final, which was a tough match, but other than that, we had a pretty smooth run to the gold medal. But it was our first biggest test, but I believed in every one of my teammates. I thought we were ready.
This is just a weird detail, but if everyone remembers, famously, one of the results at this tournament was on your side of the bracket, you had SK Gaming on the same side, and you would have met them in the semis, but then that Russian team, Virtus.pro, blew everyone's minds and upset them a bit. Do you wish you could have played SK? Like, could you have beaten them, do you think?
Yes.
Right.
Because I haven't faced SK in that era, and I would have liked to meet up with them. I believe truly that we were the best team in that era, I think most of the results speak for themselves, because some of the other results in that era as well. So obviously we had CPL where WIMP couldn't participate. I mean that does something, at least to our team. Not saying that our replacement wasn't a great player, but it's not the same. At least not with the structure we kind of build up. Then replacing one player, especially a guy like WIMP, is a tough task.
No, that's even something I was going to bring up, because after this, when you went to the CPL and you played SK there, it's not the Titans though, is it? Because even though, look, like the player who joined, if you don't know the guy, SPX, Spinksy, was a good player too, but the difference is, like you referenced, WIMP is the player of this team that would be in like a Hall of Fame. Like if someone wants to know, by the way, he's probably like a top 10 CS player ever. Like he was insanely good. Like the point is, you can't take like Messi out of Barcelona and think they'll be as good. They might be really good still, but they're not going to be as good, right? So in a way, like the two American CPLs, like, by the way, coming sixth is still pretty good, considering you lost a star player, but it's not the real Titans in that sense. Like you kind of must have known it yourselves when you were going, right? Like we're not really going to win the event probably.
No, well, obviously we were gonna give it a go, but it wasn't with the same confidence as, for example, the ESWC. Not nearly the same confidence. And as you mentioned, Spinksy was a great player. Yeah. He was a top 5 player in Denmark, most likely. Individuals, sound guy, but it's just not the same. And that's for another team. It might be easier just replacing one, and you have these roles, and you're supposed to do this and that. But we were very structured within the strategies as well. So it's a very long journey switching out one player, or at least it was for us.
Let me ask about some of the players in the lineup. This is an appropriate moment. Let's ask about WIMP then. So he was the player where, as people can imagine, if someone's not old enough to attend an American CPL, but they're the best player in your team, they must be pretty fucking good at CS. Like, this guy was a prodigy in CS, right?
He most definitely was. He was undeniably good at the game, and mechanically one of the best players I've ever played with. So he was a rifler. I was an AWPer. I mean, he was just so mechanically gifted that he could pretty much do whatever he wanted with the game. Then he needed some structure to kind of put things in perspective for him. But once we got that down, I mean, I guess me and WIMP Jonas was famously known for holding most sites together, and our team play individually and together as well. Was very, very good, but he was an amazing player, and I think he is also the one who had the longest the the longest journey with Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
Because he stayed around for a while I retired. Yeah.
And one thing I would ask is this. It's funny because when you hear a story like that, like, wow, like 15, 16-year-old kid comes along and he's blown everyone's mind in CS, people are going to assume he's just a mechanical player, like he's just got the skills. But as you referenced there, another thing I always found very impressive is for such a young guy, it seems like whiMp also got like the team aspect of Counter-Strike and the fact you have to like play off people and you have to understand how to like fit into a system as well. He wasn't just an ego player, right?
No, he was not what I call no-brainers. But no, he's just a very nice guy. Just to put it out there, his personality is great. He's a great team player. He understands what his role is. He's not trying to overshadow anybody, even though he's as good as he is. He's just a sound guy he had enormous potential when I started playing with him, and his learning curve was through the roof. Also, when you're talking about one-on-ones and where you have to kind of use a little bit experience or try and use your gaming IQ to outsmart your opponent. Even that part of the game he was fairly sound at, and then with an amazing set of skills with the mechanical part, that he was a pretty nasty player. Yeah.
Being as some of the players in this lineup of the Titans didn't actually have that many years afterwards, let me ask about some of them. So one of them you referenced already, eGene, one of the guys who was one of the in-game leaders. Who was this guy? I mean, he seemed like kind of like a glue guy in the team or something.
No, he was more of so he had a very tactical approach to the game. He was one of our key players in terms of covering solo sites alongside with EraZ, but I'll get to him. So eGene was just a smart guy, a talented player. Not a mechanical player in any sense like whiMp, but experienced player who knew to take the right decisions and gladly traded himself for the round. So he was just a smart guy basically, and with his prior in-game leader experience, then obviously he had some knowledge about the game as well. Me and him kind of I guess used a little bit of each knowledge to come up with some ideas. But yeah, eventually I took over the role, and then it was a little bit more structured than what he usually did.
And then what about, you mentioned him there, EraZ actually already played in this team. Like he didn't even go on to the SKs and the other teams afterwards. He was basically just the Titans. So who was this guy?
Yeah, he's probably the most underrated guy we have on the team, because no one really knows. Not even when we were winning, a lot of people didn't know who he was. But
sure.
Because he was a very mellow guy. He did no interviews. He didn't want any stuff like that. He just wanted to play Counter-Strike with the team. And the beauty with EraZ was that you could tell him to do anything that you would like, and he would be totally fine with it. As I mentioned, alongside with eGene, he was the main cover of solo sites, and he was pretty much always good for two. So I mean, you can't ask for a better player as a strategist than him. So I think me, whiMp, Drally probably got the most praises because we fragged the most, and that's at least way back when. It
was everything back then. Yeah, of course.
It was everything.
Yeah.
EraZ was never on the top of the scoreboard, but he might be one of the key reasons that we actually won the game. So a little bit of an ungrateful role he had within the team, but it suited him just fine. But really underrated player, and he probably didn't get the praise that he actually deserved for his performances throughout the career. At least I had with him. He stopped after the Titans and wasn't really well known before the Titans either, but within the Titans, at least the Danish team had a huge respect for us.
Was it, as you said, if someone was thinking of star players in the Titan, aside from whiMp because he had the longest career, the other name was Drally. Like I can tell you at the time when I was friends with top players, like I was friends with people like Shagwar who were AWPers, and they used to tell me these are when they were looking at the other top AWPers, it would be like, Kogu, Drally was right up there, mate. This is one of the names that they were looking at. It's like, these are my competition of the other best AWPers, right? Since you yourself were an AWPer sometimes when you chose to do it, give me some thoughts on this guy. I always thought this guy was a mega player, man. He's another player. I'm amazed he didn't play for longer. I would have thought he'd have a 10-year career. Seemed like a very talented player.
Yeah, he was the second AWPer though, so it was on particular maps that he actually used the
Right.
AWPers. It was not as much as me, or not nearly as much as me, but he's kind of comparable to whiMp because he was mechanically really gifted, and we picked him up from a team called Gatekeepers. That was a local team in Denmark, but they also they were at CPL and delivered some great results. But he was just a really mechanical gifted player, and yeah, I mean it's kind of the same situation as whiMp, just not quite there, but maybe like 80% of whiMp stature, because he delivered amazing clutches, and there's probably some highlight reels on YouTube somewhere with Drally as well, because he could have had a longer career, I guess, but stepped down. Well, they continued to SK gaming, but then eventually stepped down. But yeah, again, a great player, but a mechanical player.
Let me ask you about this then. So as you said, obviously, this is something I was going to ask now, which was, how did it work with the AWPing in this team? Because normally when you're a structured team, teams usually want to have one designated AWPer, so that it's the same every round and every map, so people are warmed up, they know what they're on. How did it work? Because whenever I watched your games or your demos back in the day, you were a really good AWPer. Like, you could have just been a primary AWPer for any team. And also, even though you were taking the IGL role sometimes, you were quite a skilled player. Like, your Deagle was really good. Like, especially on CT side, you had a mega AWP. So how did it work as to, like, when you were the in-game leader, did you AWP less? Was it, like you say, was the specific maps Drally was just the main AWPer? How did it work out in the Titans?
No, I was the main AWPer, and I AWPed, I guess, for the majority of my career, I've been an AWPer for specific maps. So we need to remember that Counter-Strike was a little bit more stationary than it is today. So you could argue for having a second AWP on some maps like Train, Dust 2,
Sure.
Cobblestone was another one. And then it would be Drally as the second AWPer. Drally was never really a main AWPer. I mean, he was good with the AWP, but he was a better rifler than an AWPer. So for me, it's always been the AWP, and it's probably my primary weapon as well. I chose to rifle on some maps, like it wasn't as trendy playing AWP on Nuke
Sure.
back in the day as it is today. So I was a ramp player on Nuke, but for the other maps, it was straight AWPing for me, on both sides basically. And I was the in-game leader as long as I was in the Titans. Apart from the very beginning.
In this era, when the team was actually at the top, would you also consider yourself a really good player? Like, I thought you were pretty skilled from the games I remember watching.
I would. I think. There were some statistics. I mean, and frags luckily isn't everything in Counter-Strike, but it obviously gives some sort of indication that you're performing on the server. And I think me and whiMp was the top ones, and then Drally shortly after. But it was not really about the frags for me. I would gladly have a 0-12 if we won the game.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't really. I mean, obviously it matters a little bit, but if I'm on the bottom of the scoreboard, I'm just fine with it as long as we win. I want to win before performing individually. So I think when we played the VCG in was it in
San Francisco, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 2004 as well.
Yeah.
I had a great tournament on VCG. I mean, we all had great tournaments. I think we switched a lot. I think that was one of the pros for the team. So if one guy was having a slight off day, then another guy would take over and make sure that they delivered.
Right.
And there wasn't really anything within the team that, let's say, for example, that whiMp always has to be on the top of the scoreboard. None of the guys had stuff like that, and that it just makes it far less complex to run a team like that. So luckily for every player on the team, it was about winning, and
okay.
However we come up with winning, it was just fine. So if one guy had to sacrifice himself for a tactic, that would be fine as well.
Right.
So that was the mentality, and it was easy to work with. But yeah, I believe when I was at the top of my game, I believed I was one of the best players in the world. Yeah.
I mean, along the lines of what you're saying, though, that also now makes a bit more sense as to why your career was the way it was if you were the leader of these teams. Because what you're describing, like having a team where it's like balanced out and there's not like one person, like I'm the big ego, I always carry, and another person like you're the shit player who does all that. If you don't have that, like I'd say most of the scene is like that. Even in Denmark as well, there's lots of big name players who have great skills and they want to be in the top team today, but they'll leave if you lose the next LAN. Like, essentially, it makes sense then because essentially, like you had the right lineup of players, like people had the same mentality.
Yeah, I do believe we had, because a lot of people was questioning the lineup also within the Danish ranks. Because I mean, not to take anything away, but a player like EraZ, no one would ever put him on a team winning ESWC, and I guess that's fine from a perspective point of view. But you can't have 5 Messis. I mean, it will never work. And each player within, and that's way more defined because I still follow Counter-Strike. I can't quite let it go.
Okay.
So I still analyze a little bit, and I still see the different matches going on. You can't have 5-star players. It has never worked, and it will never work. You need some people that fill out different roles within the team, and obviously it's not as structured as it is today. But there were role definements within the team. I mean, we all knew which part we played, and people were good with that, and I tried to play to their strengths, and if we had to switch some stuff around, then we did that.
Go on.
No, that's about it. Yeah.
I saw also, if anyone looks it up, as we said, those CPLs, no one expected the team to win because the best player couldn't attend. And also, it's not like it was like he couldn't attend and then he's out the team. He's still in the real team. It's just for that one tournament, well, 2 tournaments, you play without him, almost in the standing. So if people don't know as well, if anyone looks at the bracket, this is probably the least satisfying way to lose a CPL, because every time you did it where you won all the matches in the upper bracket, so you got guaranteed top 6, and then you just lost all the matches in game 6. It's like, and then famously, if anyone knows, the playoff matches for the spots, like 6th and 7th and 8th, were always on those American maps, like Mail and Fire and shit, which no one played. So, like, in some ways, that also has to be the bomber, right? Not only do you know your real team could do better, but once you get to that part of the upper bracket, you're thinking, hey, you know, like, we won one more game, you're in top 4, the money, and then every time you just lose out and come 6, that's be really shitty, right?
and in Europe, I mean, it's no excuse, but in Europe, we didn't really play those maps,
of course not.
Not nearly as much as the Americans did, but I mean, I had no problems with the maps. It was just, I think it was a weird format to say the least, because it doesn't really show that much. And I would have loved BO3s, but that wasn't a thing back then with the smaller placements. But I think for me, when I'm a structure fascist or whatever you want to call me, but it's an entirely different team that participated in those events, and that's also, as I mentioned, I before we started the interview, I did something similar on Danish grounds where people kind of said, well, it was basically the Titans that became SK, where I said no, it was not the Titans, because I wasn't part of it. So I have nothing against SK Gaming or the performances they made after I left. But it's not the Titans, because it's not the same 5 players. So that's a huge part for me. I don't believe you can switch out one player and expect to deliver the same results. I don't believe that's how it works. When we participated in the CPL, it was with a knowledge. It was not with the same, I guess, enthusiasm into winning. I mean, we participated obviously not to lose, but with some realistic point of view on, well, we might not go all the way to the top because our preparations are a little bit lackluster, and we lost one of our key players. We've had a great replacement player, but it's not the same. It was the same in CPL Denmark. One of the first tournaments we couldn't play with whiMp either, and those some other tournaments as well. And we just tried to make the best of it.
When you came, one of the cool things was, as well as ESWC, the World Cyber Games thought whiMp could play in. So this was another team where we got to see like, the real Titans back again. This is the one where famously you guys won the silver medal. That was the year when Team 3D won. And if people remember, it was the one where the most famous player was where Morto against 3D did that mental play behind the box on Inferno, where he just did like a 1v4, which is still the most inexplicable round of all time. Like, I swear those SK players, they must have just turned their brains off. Like, you didn't even have to run into him, bro. You could have just like gone to the other side, you know. But that's the one play everyone remembers from that tournament, right?
It is.
Here's the question I have, which is, if we look at the bracket, it's actually underrated for you guys, because first you played MIBR, and people are going to forget, this is when MIBR already was like almost really good. They already had Kogu, they already had those players that were like getting to the... And then in the semi-finals, the team no one will remember is the Maven Crew team is basically the team that becomes like We Made Fox and Eastro and all those ones, Solo, Bale, all those people remember years later, again, got really good a couple of years later. They were already in this team, and then famously in the final, you obviously played Team 3D. Give me some thoughts on this tournament. It's an interesting run of matches.
Yeah, it was, well, it's a little bit cloudy in the memory, but I remember VSG. So it was, I believe it was called part of the Olympic Games. I think they officially had some of the rings from the Olympic Games as well. So it was a great tournament with
it's a massive stage setup and stuff, right? It was really big, right?
And I think even more teams than ESWC, basically.
Yeah.
So in ESWC, for example, Asia wasn't presented. There was some other stuff that wasn't presented in ESWC in the same way as VCG. So there was a lot of unknown factors within VCG. People we haven't prepared for, and we don't know how they play. We don't know their strategies. We don't know are they aggressive, solid team, or how do they play the game. So it was good games. I mean, I think we had the upper hand, and that goes back to solid foundation again. They couldn't really. I mean, even though they were all obviously great players, they couldn't compete with the foundation of the team. And then, eventually we met 3D in the finals. Again, a game I believe we should have won. If
it could have at least been 3 maps, right? It could have at least been 3. There was one really close OT game, right?
Yeah, so we had Cobblestone, which was the map we shouldn't have lost, but we lost it. And I still, to this day, when I meet up with, it's a long time now, but when I meet up with Spinksy and Drally, they decide to boost within the safe zone of I can't remember. It's called safe. We called it safe at least. So you could pretty much cover both bomb sites from the safe position. They boosted against Rambo, where he picked off the guy below, and the guy on top kind of fall down.
Right.
So he wanted to leave on that secured them the spot, but they played great. But it was a very tough match and a close match. Also, for me personally, a great tournament. I believe there's a measurement about the accuracy of the AWPing game on all AWPers participating in the tournament. I can't remember how many shots, but the accuracy was 84%, which I think was quite good, because there's been a lot of shots within the entire tournament. So it was a great tournament, a great setting, professional setting. Great teams, and obviously 3D took the gold medal, and quite deservedly so. But we had ESWC, and then we had VCG, which was probably the most professional tournaments around, in my era.
Right, one area of why I set it up that way of who those teams were as well is because if you look at these 3 big opponents you had to beat to basically get to the medal, one's from Brazil, one's from Korea at the time, like you say, Asia was barely relevant in CS. And even the third one, Team 3 is a big team, but they're from America. Like, if we think of ESWC, you're playing all the European teams that you know, that you scrim, that you've been at LANs with. What do you even do if you're playing teams like that are from all these other regions? Like, did you actually try and like look at demos or something? What did you do to try and have prep? Because as a tactical team, you want to break down their side too, right?
Yeah, we wanted, if possible, I want to break down their side, but there was very limited material available, and obviously we couldn't scrim it. We could never scrim American teams because the ping was just horrible. We knew obviously we knew 3D, and I've seen matches with 3D, but Maven and Made in Brazil, we faced off against Made in Brazil on some other occasions as well, so we knew about them, and we knew I knew a little bit about their play style, but I mean, when you face off against a team you barely know, you can pretty much always the only thing you can do is fall back on what you do know, and that's what you're supposed to do within the team. And then obviously I speak about structure and I speak about positions and stuff like that, but it's not like everything is carved in stone. So if we see something that needs to change within the game we're playing, then I'll change it, or we will change it accordingly. But it was enough to rely on solid foundation against at least the first two teams. And as I said, we knew a little bit about Maven Brazil, but Maven, we knew about Solo pretty much. That was about it, because he was their star player, and he was mechanically a guard pretty much. I think he impressed everyone.
It was mega.
Yeah. Also, I think at VCG he impressed everyone, but it was not enough. I mean, that's my whole point, I guess, is that having star players is just simply not enough. I mean, they can't carry a game, or they shouldn't be able to carry a game against a solid foundation. I do not believe.
Right, okay. Now we get to what could be slightly drama-packed area, especially because I obviously don't know Danish, so I can't watch the podcast you're talking about, so I don't know what the story is. So as you said, one of the big mistakes people made, because I've heard them say the same thing, bro, they always say, if you go to the next year and you look, obviously an SK Danish team makes the final of ESWC themselves, and you go look at the lineup and it's like, bro, this is the Titans, look, it's like whiMp. Yeah, true, I'd like Zonic and people like that in, but I agree with you. First of all, if you ever go and look, it didn't start like that. It's not like the Titans just moved over. First of all, like piece by piece went over when the Titans died. And then secondly, some of the other players, like you say, if you're a tactical team and you don't have the IGL, it's not the same team, is it? It's obviously a fundamentally different squad. So the first thing goes like this. I noticed that it wasn't just like the Titans just one day was like, right, we closed down. Like you actually had like a couple of small lands you guys went to that you just didn't win. You just actually lost to some like mixed teams and lesser teams. And then all of a sudden one day, it's just like people start leaving the roster. And then as I say, like a few people go over and make SK and they make their Danish clubs. If you remember, the story went at the time, SK didn't have their Swedish team because they'd made that NIP super team. So there was like a spot open, which fully enough, they did get a Swedish team back after that. But they made this Danish lineup at the time and gradually made it sort of like the Titans light, as I would call it, you know. So what's the story from your perspective? Like, obvious question is, why weren't you involved? Why did the Titans die? Couldn't it have kept going? It looked like a great team.
Good question. I mean, before they became SK Gaming, I left the Titans, and a guy named Kalk, he is the
guy recently was at NIP, Jonas Gunderson.
Yes, he joined the team as the in-game leader. So that was before there was any SK conversation. I think to just going back to why we didn't, I guess, persist longer with the top team. I think we were all fairly young guys, and obviously there was some school stuff and education stuff coming up, and I said the same in the Danish podcast I did that for me getting to the top was, and this probably sounds like a stupid excuse, but for me getting to the top was way more challenging, interesting, exciting than staying at the top.
Right.
So I mean, I wouldn't say that I didn't want to, let's say, defend the throne or whatever for a longer period, but it was like when we topped our game in 2004 and we won the majority of the tournaments that we participated in, people kind of stepped down a notch, keeping up with internal competitions, keeping your game sharp. I myself also, I mean, on the strategy part, kind of took a step down. So I think everyone kind of had topped their game, and I don't think we ever had the conversation. Basically, I think that was one of the key problems, that it all happened so fast in 2004. So we won the ESWC, we got a second at the World Cyber Games, we won numerous Danish events and some Scandinavian events as well, and we didn't really ever had that conversations where, okay, well, what's the next step for this team? Are we gonna keep grinding and keep trying to deliver results? Because we had a fairly strict practice schedule, so we played pretty much every day from 6 to 11, and then we had one day in the weekend off, but we played constantly. I mean, really put in some hours, and then just after the VCG, I mean, I lost motivation, and a lot of other players lost some motivation as well. So I decided to step down, and then eventually they got offered the SK position. I wouldn't have joined either way because I needed a break from Counter-Strike. I came back sometime after that.
But there was no bad blood or anything. There was no drama involved in it, like they didn't play with you or something, right?
No. It was no. There really wasn't. I just decided to step down because I don't want to. I'm not good at not being number one. So if I want to play, I can't play for fun like that. Not if it's my main thing. I mean, as I mentioned, I came back and it was for fun, but even then I couldn't stop like pursuing the next big achievement. So I'm not good at playing stuff just for the fun of it. So I decided to step down. I focused on some education stuff, and then I joined a team or created a team later on. But the ambition was not nearly the same. But getting back to the SK Gaming, so they pretty much moved, as I remember, it's a long time ago. But they moved the Titans over to SK Gaming. So that was Kelly instead of me. And then I believe within a short period of time, there was some replacements. But, I mean, it's a different team.
Yes.
So at least if you ask me, then it has nothing to do with the Titans. So if you switch, you mentioned it yourself, if you switch out the in-game leader and you decide to try on new approaches, new strategies, then it's another team. You're doing some other stuff. Yeah. So that was pretty much it. I mean, I mentioned it also to the guys because we've obviously spoken since, but all of the guys kind of lost their magic touch. I mean, we couldn't really perform to the level that we did in ESWC, and I don't think none of us was complacent on being a top 5, 7, 10 team in the world. Then it's better, at least from my point of view, to stop and then do some other stuff. Yeah.
Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Scrominati, who, in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Haju, Mac Pugnaccio Rakula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Go, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to say on my channel. Do you want teasers to find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thorin interviews are? Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.